Superman.
Miss Lane.
Hey, buddy. Eyes up here.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Road to Superman. This is episode 98, and today we have a really fascinating article to go through, and it's confirmed that Superman is weaker than other versions of the Man of Steel. And Gunn's explanation for this is quite controversial. But first, let me know what draws you to the character of Superman. Is it his strength, his morals, or maybe something else? Let me know whatever your answer is in the comments below. And so let's get into some of the talking points from the Rolling Stone article. In the Superman trailer, we see that Lois already knows Clark is Superman, so you bypassed one of the stickiest issues. How does Lois not see past the glasses? It comes up again later in the movie and it's explained. She says it, we mention it, and it's a one-off and people chuckle, but there's stuff later on in the movie about the glasses that are canon. That's canon in the comics, and I'm interested to see what explanation they go with. It's definitely the most comical disguise of all time, but maybe they're going to add more layers to it, which makes it feel more acceptable. I do like how David Corenswet changes his posture and even his voice for when he is Clark Kent versus when he is Superman, which does add to the disguise more, but it sounds like there is more to it now, so let me know your theories in the comments below. And now let's talk about the Clark and Lois interview scene. I've seen a bit of the movie, and there's a very grounded interview scene between Lois and Clark that seems like new territory for you. That's a huge thing for me. I have long talking scenes in Guardians, but they are stuffed with jokes, and that's not the case here. There's funny stuff that happens in that scene, but it's all situational, and so allowing myself to write that scene, which is truly about two characters and the different ways they see the world and morality. And I have to say, this is one of my most anticipated scenes in the entire film. I love the ethical and moral debates in these films, especially between two good people, so I'm very excited to see how this scene plays out. But now let's talk about the most controversial comment from Gunn about the power levels of Superman. What were some of the other things you felt that you needed to explain to make this Superman work? There are things that I know I don't explain that I don't even want to say out loud, but I wanted Superman to be vulnerable. I see the online things, who would beat whom? Homelander or Superman or whatever, Adam Warlock or Brightburn, and I'm like, this is the stupidest conversation. Like, so then whoever would win this fight means that they're the best? Because I'll just go out and write God-Man who can destroy you with a wink, and I win. I win all the fights forever, but I didn't want a Superman who could punch planets. And we're also creating a whole universe now, so what's a girl with wings gonna do in the face of that? So he's a little less powerful. Guy Gardner's pretty powerful. They're all pretty powerful. Now I get where he is coming from, but I don't like it when characters are nerfed for the sake of other characters. I think I prefer it when other characters' strengths are elevated to get closer to Superman's than the other way round. But I get what he means about being the most powerful doesn't necessarily mean he's the best. And I do think many confuse strongest with best, but I think most know Superman because he is so powerful. I became obsessed with Superman because of his morals and his powers. For me, it's the same with Spider-Man and Captain America. I love their ethics and their powers and how they use those powers for good. So I'm interested to see how much weaker he is and if it still works for the movie. He is still classed as the strongest superpowered being on the planet, so he is still very, very strong, but clearly not as strong as maybe how Cavill's Superman was presented, which I think will take some time to adjust to, but from the trailers, I never really felt that Corenswet's Superman was extremely weak. I just assumed the villains were extremely powerful or used kryptonite to weaken him. I know technically all live-action versions are probably nerfed compared to the most powerful versions of Superman in the comics, but I think they are all nerfed at different levels. However, I do think making him weaker does allow for more stories to be told, and it makes the stakes higher as you know Superman can actually be hurt. Not only that, but a good point that Real Anarchy made was that when he gets knocked down and you can see he is in pain, but he gets up and pushes on, that is so much more powerful and emotional than if he was extremely strong and just brushes it off and keeps on fighting. And having a Superman who is more vulnerable means you don't need to have endgame level villains for every single Superman story for the stakes stakes to be high. Take the Snyderverse as the perfect example. I absolutely love all three of those films, but in Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, they needed Zod and Doomsday to appear to increase the stakes. And both of those characters died in those films, so those characters were gone forever from the connected universe. And in the Snyder Cut, Superman was so powerful that Steppenwolf was useless against him. He didn't even lay a finger on him, where Steppenwolf easily took out the rest of the League on his own. So Superman was so much more powerful than the other heroes. And like I said, I was fine with that. I absolutely love those films and I love the takes on those characters. But for a long-term plan that the DCU is creating, I can also completely understand why making Superman less powerful so that he can be beaten is something that they want to do. Basically, I'm happy with either approach as long as it works for the story. Although I do really hope that Superman becomes more powerful as time goes on in the DCU, so as he gets older and more experienced, the stronger he becomes. Which would also mean as the stakes rise as we get further on in the DCU, the power levels also rise as well, and I hope we get that with Superman. I think it would also be a sign of character development, and another sign of character development is the costume changing with each film, and Gunn has confirmed that this is something they will do in the DCU. I know a huge motivation for them changing the costume is to sell new versions of the same toy, but I also think it has a storytelling purpose. If you look at Captain America, each costume he wears reflects his character development. It starts old-fashioned, but then starts modernizing as Cap becomes more used to being in the modern day, and I really want that for Superman as well. This suit is a great start, but I think if we see his costume changing and improving over time, it reflects the journey his character goes on throughout these films, and I think his power levels could also be a part of that character development. Because then in 10 years' time, we can look back at the journey he has been on and seen a very clear route of progression. At least that's how I see it. Let me know how you see it in the comments below. And the final update is revealing how the movie starts. On a story level, what cracked Superman for you? It was Krypto. The beginning of the movie is the first thing I wrote, with Krypto coming to Superman in the snow and Krypto taking him home. That really was about the tone of the whole movie. It's a flying dog who wears a cape, but that led immediately to the robots, to the fortress rising from the ground, to the device that isn't in the comics, the giant magnifying glass, which powers him up more quickly than just the regular sun would. Bringing all those elements into a Superman movie in a way that hasn't happened, not to mention that he exists in a world where superheroes or some form of metahumans have existed for 300 years. It's just a different thing. And so he confirms that the movie starts with Superman crashing into the ice and being healed by the robots at the Fortress of Solitude. And this is really interesting to have confirmed, because it means that surely we will have a flashback to find out who puts him in this state. And that's quite a unique way of starting a superhero movie. Now, I have a little theory that the movie will jump back in time to tell parts of this story. So it starts with this scene, but then when he is being healed, maybe he faints or something happens which causes us to go back in time a few days to find out the events that lead up to this moment. Maybe that's where we see him being interviewed by Lois after stopping the war, and maybe the fight against the Hammer of Baravia, the Kaiju, and Ultraman happen as well. Either way, at some point this flashback could organically lead us back to the fortress where we see the scene play out again, but then we follow on from it in the present day. And then that's where we see Luthor invade the fortress and take out the robots, and then all of this from the latest trailer is from the final battle. So perhaps the first act is this crashing scene, and then flashbacks to what happens before, and then all the way up to Superman crashing into the ice, and then Act 2 starts with us continuing on from this healing scene, and then Act 3 is one final big battle. Let me know what you think of that theory in the comments below. But that is all for today's episode of The Road to Superman. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you never miss an episode. I hope to see you here again soon, so until then, have a great day. Bye!